We are here for our rhetoric and writing lecture this week for week 5. And this one will probably be the longest of the three. So if you want to break it into two, maybe watch 10 minutes or so, I'll try to get it done in 20 minutes. We'll see. That's my goal. Again, this is kind of a lecture that I would deliver in class in about 20 minutes, but we'd probably break it up with some activities and things. So it might be closer to 30 minutes, but I'll try to get it done as quickly as possible. And again, like I said, you may want to break this one up into two. The reading lecture is going to be pretty short this week, but this has quite a bit of content, and I think this is really important. To me, it's the core of what we do in 088, English 088 and English 101, which is figuring out how to move an audience, so to speak. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. We started talking about this a little bit when we mentioned ethos, pathos, and logos. These are major appeals to an audience. So we're going to talk for this week's lecture I'm going to talk about rhetoric and writing in the sense of persuasion, how we persuade people, and then something that's called a classical argument. You can find a lot more information about classical argument in the Harbrace Essentials book from pages 38 to 51. And here's my Valentine's Day thing. I had to at least acknowledge that Valentine's Day is Monday the 14th, moving through February, which I'm not too sad to see February go. As I look out my window here, I'm seeing a lot of melting going on today, which is great. I'm glad to see that. All right. So this is Cicero. You're like, no, that's not Cicero. Wait a minute. Looks like Rome. Yes, it's Rome. No, I mean, the guy up here in the front of the room is Cicero. And I share this image a lot with students because I think it's kind of interesting because the college is located in Cicero. And the namesake for the town of Cicero was a man named Cicero who lived in ancient Rome, before there was such a thing as Italy as a country, right? This is the Roman Empire, and was a great orator, great speaker. And he had a nemesis. I don't know, maybe he's sitting out here somewhere, Catiline, and they had these great political debates and arguments. So he's a very famous person that often gets brought up when we talk about argument, especially we're talking about classical argument, which, as you know, classical usually means synonym for old, right? So classical argument is something that goes back to ancient Greek society, ancient Roman society. It was a very important part. This, in some ways, you can see this is the Senate, the Roman Senate, I think. It looks a little bit like, in some ways, like our Senate in Washington, D.C. I mean, the people sitting here, there's one guy in the front talking, making his case, so to speak, and persuading people. So we're going to talk about claims, which you make a claim, you give evidence, and then also opposing views. Now, I will say, I'm kind of doing this in the reverse order, and we'll talk more about persuasion as we go into the semester too. But persuasion is just basically, the way I like to think of it anyway, is if I want to persuade you to do something, I already know what I want you to do. So I've decided, okay, I want my son to do the laundry. It's not like a debate, right? I'm just saying, I want you to do the laundry, and how am I going to persuade you? So I could predict the consequences. I could say, if you don't do your laundry, and I could do that in a lot of different ways, right? It's going to pile up in your room. It's going to smell bad, whatever. So there's a lot of ways I could persuade him, but I've already basically decided the outcome that I want. Argument is a little different, I think, because really, in a really good classical argument, you're looking at both sides. Maybe you're not 100% sure you want him to do that laundry, or when you want him to do it, or whatever it might be. That's probably a bad example, but you get my point, I hope, is that argument, there's a lot of room for looking at, what we call opposing views. And so that's going to be the difference when I ask you to write an essay that has a classical argument. It's very important that you bring in the opposing viewpoints into your essay. So this is very similar. We talked just briefly, I think, about essay structure in the first part of the semester, where we talked about an essay has an introduction, you state a thesis, you try to prove that, give evidence, and you conclude. That's not so much different, when we're writing an argumentative essay. This is Socrates here, right before he died. I mean, I don't know how old this painting is, but it's probably done in the medieval time, or maybe like the Renaissance. I don't know who painted this. I can't remember. Anyway, it's supposed to be Socrates, and he's making this last argument. He's got his finger up right before he dies. All arguments have at their core a claim. In other words, you think something is true and you believe that. Socrates was arguing sort of for his life. He was executed, but or martyred, or whatever you want to call it. But he had to take poison, and mainly because he had this very strong opinion that he would not give up on. So he was arguing for a claim. I believe I'm right, and I'm going to argue for that at all costs. So a claim is the core of an essay. Just, you have an opinion, you feel strongly about it, And it always works better if it is something you actually care about. So if you can, in any way possible, uh, finesse your thesis statement so it's actually something you believe and care about, makes the writing a lot easier because you don't really have to pretend. You can actually bring in your natural emotion. So, but whatever topic, sometimes you don't have the luxury of that. You just have to write an essay and your teacher's assigned it to you and you can't really find a way to really connect to it. That can be hard. But if you can, that connection helps a lot. Now, when you make that claim, there's two things about it. This is something that's going to come up on our quiz, our next quiz, quiz number 2. I'll ask you probably to be able to recognize the difference between an absolute claim or a moderate claim. And you might be able to guess just by hearing those two words. Absolute claim is something that's always true, 100% of the time, never varies. A moderate claim, you're saying it's sometimes true or false. So, let's say you were trying to prove to somebody that they were being rude to you or something. An absolute claim would say, you are always rude to me. And a moderate claim would be, sometimes you've been rude to me in the past, right? Sometimes. That's a lot easier to prove. Most people would say, yeah, I guess you're right. There have been times, reasonable person, right? I probably have been rude to you. I'm sorry about that. But if you say you're always rude to me, it's like, they might say, I don't think that's true. There's been times. At one time I was nice. I opened the door. I took out the guard, whatever it was, right? So something can be always true is very hard to prove. So just be careful when you're writing your thesis. Probably most of the time you don't want to have an absolute claim as your thesis, although in some cases it works. Okay, so a little bit more about a classical argument. So again, we make a claim. That claim is basically a thesis statement, similar, right? Where we state our position with either moderate or absolute, probably moderate, and then we give evidence to back that up. And again, you might remember a week ago or so, if you watched this video for rhetoric, we talked about ethos, pathos, and logos. These are 3 ways you can organize your ideas in ways that might appeal to someone or might persuade them. Ethos being like the character, like making them believe you're a good person, a trustworthy person. Pathos using emotion, and logos using more good ideas or logic. So however you do that, once you make that claim, you do have to give evidence to back up the claim. Here's something that's different from just a standard sort of persuasive essay and a more argumentative essay, I think. Refutation. So it sounds like the word reputation, but it's actually to refute something is basically to disprove it. And so in refutation, you actually introduce somebody else's views, but the only reason you're really introducing their views is to show, hey, I understand the other side, but I still don't agree with them. And you can imagine if somebody asked you the question, I know you believe in this, but do you know anything about the other side, their opinion, the people who disagree with you? And if you say no, it kind of lessens your power of your argument because it shows that you don't even have any knowledge about the other side. So how could you disagree with something you don't even understand? Whereas if you say, oh no, I completely understand, let me explain, this is what the other side believes. And if you can do that really well, it's very powerful because it shows that you're a reasonable person and it shows that you not only understand the other side, but that you disagree, with them. So again, disagreeing with something you don't understand is a lot less persuasive than in this case where you disagree with something you actually do understand, or if you can show that. And that's what refutation is really, to me, all about. Last one, that's sort of an important part of the classical argument is something called concession. And again, a lot of this stuff, if you've been in my 088 class, I've talked about this before, but we're going to spend more time with it. I'm introducing it earlier in the semester, so you'll really get good with these concepts, hopefully, by the end of the class. These are things that not only will work in an English class, but anytime you have to write a paper, the whole idea of writing a classical argument can work for just about any class if you have to prove something. Now, if you're in a biology class, you're writing a research paper, that's probably different than this, although there might be an argument contained in there. So again, anytime you have to prove something, not just in an English class, these strategies can be helpful. Concession sounds like where you go at the basketball game to get a Coke, but it's actually to concede, right? To basically say, it's almost, maybe we could use the word here instead of concession, the word surrender. It's almost like you're giving up, not completely surrendering, not completely giving up, but giving up just a little bit. And again, this is really powerful because it shows if you can do this in writing effectively, or if you're giving a speech, if you can do this, it shows that you're a reasonable person. And you've heard people do this before. If you've ever heard a politician or even somebody in a TV commercial sometimes, they'll say, I know that, part of what you say is true. I won't dispute that. But overall you're still wrong, right? So you're showing like, I can accept this part of your argument. And again, that just shows that you're reasonable, that you understand them. So you concede, you give up a little bit, but you don't give up the whole thing. You're still sticking with your thesis. And so this can be a powerful thing to do. And let me go forward. I think we have, oh yeah. So that's, I'm just going to go back actually real quickly. So when we talk about argument, the basic classical argument, which I'm going to ask you guys to think about as you work through the next few essays, you have a claim, which is either absolute or moderate. You provide evidence to back it up, which would be in the body of the essay. And then maybe near the end of the body or the conclusion, you might do either refutation or concession, again, where you either say, I understand the other side and I disagree, or maybe you give up a little bit and say, I agree with part of their position, but not the whole thing. This kind of thing happens a lot in debate, but you can use it in persuasive writing too. Speaking of persuasion, let's talk just a little bit about a few methods of persuasion. So again, in most essays, you might not be writing an argumentative essay, and you might just clearly be trying to persuade somebody. This is my opinion. I want you to agree with it. The woman at the bottom here telling the man, you need to eat an apple, put down that pizza, eat more healthy, right? That's a kind of persuasion. Maybe two women here having a conversation, and maybe one is trying to persuade the other one to do something, or maybe she's depressed and she's trying to persuade her to be happier, or I don't know, whatever. But there's one-to-one interaction, but they're persuading. A team meeting at work might be some persuasion, trying to get this person to do something different, or even this guy, like this minister or group, whatever this person is here on the right-hand side at the top, speaking to a huge audience and maybe persuading them to do something. It's a TED Talk. He's persuading them to think about some new idea. So persuasive writing shows up in all kinds of places, but the focus of persuasion is to convince the reader to consider a particular point of view. TV commercials, college brochures or college advertising on social media, junk mail that you get in the mailbox. Maybe sometimes you don't want that, but it's trying to persuade you to do something. Advertisements you see on YouTube when you're watching videos there, or wherever it might be. These are all, trying to convince you to change your behavior or think about something different, which is what persuasion is really all about. This is in the Harbrace book, around pages 2 to 4. And we talked about this, I think, early on in the semester when I looked at the speech from Martin Luther King and one from Abraham Lincoln, and we saw how they looked at their opportunity or their challenge, the audience, the purpose, and then the situation or the context, which is what you want to think about. And then sort of based on all that, you might choose a method of persuasion, which we're going to talk about just a little bit today, and then maybe also the appropriate format. Now, I know for our class, the format or genre is going to be essay writing. We're not writing business letters. We're not writing research papers. We're not writing letters to the editor. So our genre is kind of already decided. In other situations, you might have to choose that. All right, so here's just a quick example. Now, this is going back a bit, summer of 2020, right? And we're still wearing masks, right, if we're in face-to-face classes. But this example was from them, so it's maybe a little dated, but I think it makes a point, hopefully, about how we might persuade somebody in real life. So you notice that one of your friends wasn't wearing a mask when going out of the house. Now again, think back to summer of 2020. The pandemic was new. People were actually very afraid, more so than now, I think. So what did you want your friend to consider? Who is your friend? So these are some questions you can kind of ask. You're thinking about your audience, trying to understand them. Why didn't he want to wear a mask? What values did your friend have? So understanding what somebody cares about is often a good way to persuade them. So again, you have the situation, and you're thinking back, this is almost 2 years ago now. Gosh, I can't believe we've been in this situation this long, but here we are. And so then you want to think, so you think about your audience first, and then you want to think about your purpose, your context. You wanted to convince your friend to wear a mask because you were concerned about their safety. Again, this is summer of 2020. I think we're right at the end now of where we may be, the governor is saying lifting mask mandates and things like that in the city of Chicago and around the state maybe. So we may be, but this was summer of 2020, 2 years ago almost. How did your purpose connect with the interest of your audience? So one of the best ways to persuade someone is to think, I have a purpose. I want them to be safe. How do I connect that with their interest? How do I connect my interest with their interest? If you can do that, we sometimes call that finding common ground. It's one of the most persuasive things you can do, because if somebody feels like you have their best interest and that you have a shared interest, it can be very persuasive. So with your friend, I don't know, you can think about that. How might you do that to try to, ask them questions maybe. Do do you think it's healthy what you're doing? You're going out, and then, I know you care about mom and dad, but you're going out and this is your friend though, not your brother. I'm sorry. You care about your parents, let's say, but you're going out, you're around people. You might be bringing the virus back home where your parents are older or maybe not as healthy. So you start thinking about ways that things that might be important to them, their family, their whatever it might be, and see if you can connect to that. What effect did you want to have on your friend? Did you want to entertain them? And no, probably not. You're not trying to just make them laugh. You want to inform them, maybe even argue a point. I think you should be more careful and more safe. And what are some political, social, cultural factors? Well, there's a lot of information out there, if you look in social media especially, that may or may not be accurate, and it's hard to know these days, depending on where that person's getting their information. You guys might have very different viewpoints, and that can be kind of scary and disorienting. So this is part of the social, cultural, political stuff. That's the context, right? So we have the purpose, what we want, and we have the context. And the more you understand about that, the more persuasive you can be. Even if you don't like it, you can still be more persuasive if you understand that context. So let's say you've done all that and you've thought, okay, now how do I persuade them? Well, these are 5. I've shared these if you've been in my OED8 class. These are not new. I didn't make these up. These are just kind of 5 tried and true, sort of old-fashioned maybe ways of persuading, but they still work, I think, in lots and lots of cases. So facts. It's just a statement of what is. So if you can find something and to say it's a fact, to me, it means you have to be able to document it somehow. You have to find a source. There are facts that are just obvious. The sun's going to come up tomorrow morning, right? But a lot of things these days, it's very tricky because there's a lot of misinformation that can be floating around. So this can be very tricky. But if you can find something that you would both agree on, your friend and you might persuade them, more about this. It's hard though, because there's a lot of scientific things that really have been debated, and again, there's so much misinformation. So this is a tough one, but facts are about as persuasive as you can get. Another one is examples, and they have to be clearly related to your thesis. So if you're writing an essay, that's easier. If you're trying to persuade your friend, obviously your examples have to be related to what you're trying to persuade them. So my neighbor was not wearing a mask. They went to work, they got sick, they came home, 3 weeks later they were dead. Or something. That's not true. I'm sorry. But, that could be or they were very sick and whatever, but that's an example. It's true because you knew the person. That could be both a fact and an example. It's better though if it's not just 1 or 2 people. It's really better if it's a bigger sample. So when you're really trying to prove something, just saying that 1 person did it may not be that persuasive. But if you knew of hundreds of people who were in that situation, whatever it might be. It doesn't have to be related to masks. It can be related to our essay topic that we're working on too. Referring to an authority. So this is using an expert on your subject to try to persuade someone. We do this all the time in writing, and it usually happens by quoting someone, quoting a person who's an expert in our subject. Predicting the consequences. This is a very powerful, also persuasive method. And it's basically when we use the word if. We say, for example, if you wear a mask, it's more likely that you will not, or it's less likely that you will get the virus. That would be predicting the consequences. Or if you do get the virus, it's likely that you could infect your roommate or your parents or whoever you live with, right? So this could be a prediction. Making that prediction, if the person relates to it, can be very persuasive. And then finally, answering the opposition. I know you don't like to wear masks, it's uncomfortable, all this stuff, but it's really safer because and so you basically understand what their opposition is, why they're not wanting to do this, and you try to give them a good answer for that. So these are 5 methods of persuasion. I'm going to come back to these several times throughout the semester. I'm going to remind you about them and say, oh, maybe you could add one of these methods of persuasion into the body of your essay. And I would say if you can do 2 of these, somehow include at least 2 methods of persuasion in every essay, that goes a long way toward making your essay strong and having a very, good body that basically makes your point really clear and strongly. So think about that for your next essay. Try to incorporate 1 or 2 of these in if possible. All right. So again, going back to the friend, you might do something like taking into consideration what you know about your friend, your purpose, and the context. What methods might have persuaded your friend to wear a mask? Again, if you were interested in doing this, I'm not, trying to be political here. I'm just choosing a very current topic that's going on right now in our world. But if you were interested in persuading someone to do that, and especially going back to summer of 2020 when things were even scarier, which of these might work? So this is something, if we were in class, we would kind of take some time and think about this. But if you want to, you could either go back. If you're not sure what these are, you could go back and look here at this slide again, or replay my explanation if that's helpful, and then think about it. And this is just for you to think how you might persuade using these one or more, two or three of these examples. And again, the idea is that you can then transfer that into your essay writing. Being able to use these in your essays again adds a lot to the persuasive power of your essay. All right, so that again, this is the same thing we would talk about with your friend, knowing everything you know about the situation. How would you deliver the message? You're not going to write an essay to your friend to persuade them to wear a mask, would you? Would you? Probably not. A print document, a text message, a phone call, face-to-face. So, just something to think about. Again, if we were in class, we would discuss this, but this is just for you to think about. How would you approach a friend in this situation? And this is our format or genre. And again, for our class, the format and genre is generally going to be an essay, not a text message or phone call. And these are, again, the 5 methods that we've talked about, and a little more information on each one. But I'm going to stop there because, again, I did promise I'd make these videos fairly brief. But again, the methods of persuasion, I will put a handout if you want to review these. It's in the PowerPoint here, but I'll also put a handout that just includes the methods of persuasion with an example of each one. And again, remember, this is our we're doing 2 things today. We're looking at this idea of a classical argument, and then we're also looking at within that just some different ways that you can persuade. So hopefully this was useful. And again, I will come back to this throughout the semester, but those 5 methods of persuasion in particular, I really would like you to think about if you can incorporate 1 or 2 of those, or even more if you're able to do that, into each one of your essays as we go throughout the rest of the semester. And again, it'll really strengthen that body of the essay. Sounds like I'm an exercise coach or something. You're like, strengthen the body, right? No, but I mean the body of your essay. Again, I hope everybody had a happy Valentine's Day and a good, if you're a Super Football fan, you enjoyed the Super Bowl. And I will see you in the next video, the reading video, whichever order you're watching this in. And again, as always, if you have any questions, please send me an email or find me in the office hours in the course room, which I'm there twice a week, and I can meet at other times if you need my assistance.